Top of the morning to you, podcast listeners. I regretted that immediately. Hey, here's a bonus episode featuring Matt and Tiny. HBO's Boardwalk Empire ended its 5-season run a few weeks ago, and they've both been following the show and podcasting about it along the way. You can actually check out Obsessive Viewer episode 33 for their podcast devoted to season 4 if you haven't heard it yet, but this one is all about season 5 and the end of the show. I don't watch it, that's why I'm giving you this short intro. So I'm sure it's a great show. I don't know. Steve Buscemi's pretty cool. Anyway, be sure to check out ObsessiveViewer.com where Matt has reviewed every episode of the final season. And if you're new to our show, please take a look around the website and download some of the other episodes that might interest you. Quick plug, just because I can, this episode is brought to you by my band, As Good As It Gets. We just released our first EP, Something Old, and you can download it on Bandcamp for free, which is awesome. Free is the best kind of anything. You can find it at asgoodasitgetsband.bandcamp.com or do that usual search on Facebook or Google or however you find music anywhere. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for downloading. Sorry I couldn't be with you guys for this episode, but I hope you'll enjoy Matt and Tiny anyway. See you guys.
We can just go with the 21st part. Like the 21st Amendment. Repealed the prohibition. High five. Yeah.
Hello and welcome to a special bonus episode of the Obsessive Viewer podcast. This is Matt, and joining me today across from me is Tiny.
And he's hilarious today.
I am pretty hilarious
Matt
today.
Matt wouldn't high five me. My awesome 21st Amendment joke.
It was a 21st Amendment joke. No, it was good, Tiny. It was good.
It was. My hand doesn't know that because you wouldn't high five it. But
well, your hand goes through a lot anyway.
Jeez. Whoa.
That was
X-rated over here.
Anyway, so today this is a bonus episode devoted to the series finale and last season and the series as a whole of Boardwalk Empire, HBO's prohibition gangster drama, which, if I put Mike's intro in, you guys already know. So before we get started, I just want to mention that we recorded a bonus episode devoted to Boardwalk Empire Season 4 and the seasons preceding it last year, and you can find that it's episode 33 of the podcast. The link's in the show notes and all that. So if you want more Boardwalk or want the precursor to this episode, go back and listen to that one. I'm actually really proud of it. So
it was fun.
Yeah, it was good. So we've got a lot of ground to cover, Tiny.
We do.
Where do you want to start? Should we go? It's so much to process, the entire series as a whole, and we talked about a lot of it last year. We already covered like where we started with the show. Mm-hmm. So why don't we talk about starting off the 5th season? Just because when we recorded last year's episode, it was announced that it was renewed for a 5th season. We didn't know that it was going to be the last season.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we talk about how we felt about the show ending and how we felt about the show ending with a shortened season. So
okay.
Where were you the day they announced it would be the last season?
Well, it all starts in a crowded little hospital in Indianapolis in 1987.
Callback! Did you listen to the episode?
I did.
Nice! That is awesome. I didn't finish it. How did it end?
I don't,
that was wow.
Yeah. No, but nice. I honestly don't remember. I think you told me.
Probably.
That, because, you're always on top of all the news and everything.
Well, Facebook tells me things.
You're friends with Mark Zuckerberg?
No.
Facebook tells
Let's
you.
save that for the David Fincher retrospective.
Ooh.
Yes.
Committed to it now. Now we have to do it. Boom.
End of January. Last 2 weeks of January.
Whoa. Pump the brakes, buddy.
It's on the boards. Anyway.
So I'm pretty sure you told me about it, and I was like, huh? I was bummed because why, man?
I know.
Just why?
Well, I know exactly why, actually.
Yeah. It didn't hit me as hard as I thought it would. Because for some reason with this show, I always seemed to like process it immediately, the episode and then the seasons, and I just kind of like push it from my memory until it came back the next season.
Okay.
I don't know why. It just never sat with me for very long. Which that's not really a comment on the show itself.
I was going to ask.
It's just how I dealt with it. I don't know why. For some reason, I never really let it marinate, I guess.
Do you? And that's weird because that seems like kind of the that seems pretty antithetical to the actual show, pretty much. Cause
Absolutely,
it's a very dense show.
It's so immersive, yeah.
Oh yeah, and it requires a lot of dedication, pretty much.
Yeah, which I have not been very well dedicated to the show because I've never rewatched any of it.
Right,
None of it.
Yeah, which I'll get to when we get to my turn on this. But so did you feel like upset or anything? Because I know that we talked about how, I talked about like, oh, they could really take it to the end of Prohibition. They can go for another 6 years.
And, well, I was a little bummed, but at the same time, I was like, I think 5 seasons for a show is like kind of perfect. There's always exceptions, but,
right.
And I think this show is one of them. But,
an exception?
Exception, yeah. Okay. I think it's an exception to that. But, at the time, I was like, well, 5 seasons is kind of perfect. 60 episodes right around there. So maybe it'll be a good thing. But that was naive Tiny. That was a year ago naive Tiny.
Right.
Not thinking in the context of this show and how unique it is to television, really. So yeah, I had kind of a flippant opinion when I heard about it. And now I'm regretting that opinion.
Right. Like where I was when it came to pass that it would be the final season was that, if I remember correctly, it was kind of a staggered announcement. It was like, hey, by the way, 5th season is going to be the last season, and then a few months later, it's like, oh yeah, that final season, it's going to be 8 episodes. Yeah, which we'll get to that in a second. But when I heard that it was the final season, I was like, well, that's expected. It was because the ratings have never been that great. It doesn't have the appeal that that HBO kind of counted on it to have. It premiered in the fall before Game of Thrones premiered, so HBO had 2 huge niche dramas
that are both expensive.
That are both so expensive, and Boardwalk Empire is extremely expensive. I think it was because of the price. I don't know exactly if this is the reason or anything, but after 2-3 seasons, they lost their Boardwalk set.
Really?
Like the set, like they couldn't afford to have it anymore.
I remember reading at one point that it was the largest television set ever.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was
not movie, but television.
Right. And it was amazing.
Oh, it was. And like, you think every time they shot there, they had to use a ton of CGI.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that makes sense.
Yeah. So they lost that, and it's, I assume that that's just a cost cutting measure.
Right.
And I think just the fact that Game of Thrones was such a huge, massive hit.
Yeah.
Didn't really do much for Boardwalk Empire, because I can just imagine. HBO is pretty progressive in terms of executive, in terms of knowing what what their product is,
right,
and how it can perform and everything. But it's also like, okay, well, Game of Thrones is this kind of high fantasy series that's killing everything.
Yeah.
Beheading the competition,
except for Walking Dead.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And then, oh hey, here's Boardwalk Empire, this gangster drama. Why isn't this performing? But
it's rooted in history.
Yeah,
as opposed to fantasy.
Yeah, and I think that, if I remember correctly, we probably talked about this before, but it was a show that, somewhat like its main character, existed in a time where it couldn't really keep up with the rest of its industry or whatever. That's a really hard way of saying that Nucky didn't really belong in the gangster world.
It was a bit of an anachronism.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah. I can see that a little bit.
Yeah, and like I knew that it was like there's a bunch of writing on the wall. For one thing, Terrence Winter, who's awesome. He's so awesome. If you've heard him, if you've heard him in interviews and stuff, he's like this really cool guy. But so the show was announced for its final season. at the time and currently, Terrence Winter is working on a rock and roll drama for HBO set in the 70s starring Bobby Cannavale. So the writing on the wall of that is that he's... And there's conjecture that Boardwalk Empire turned into an ensemble where he wanted a Nucky-focused story. And so I feel like maybe he was a little disenfranchised by the fact that Boardwalk Empire became about the supporting characters, the historical characters, Al Capone, Luciano, Rothstein to an extent, Van Alden.
Yeah.
And Harrow and Chalky, Narcisse, Jip, all that. So, and I feel like maybe it just wasn't the show that he wanted to be making, and it's something that they say. he says in interviews that halfway through writing the fourth season, we had Nucky in Tampa with this whole plot with wow, what is her name?
Patricia Arquette.
Patricia Arquette.
I don't remember the character's name. Roxy?
No, I can't remember, but
I have no idea where I got Roxy from.
I don't know either.
Yeah.
But we have this whole plot with him, and he's kind of feeling like maybe I should be getting out, maybe I should find a way to go legit and all that. And they're like, this was a lot quicker than we anticipated for this character. And if you watch in season 4, Nucky's not really that in it or very involved in the season.
Right.
In fact, and that's one of the, I hesitate to say best things about season 4, but it led to the show focusing on Chalky and Narcisse, which Chalky is one of the best characters on the show. So I feel like between him having him running a show that is underperforming drastically from HBO's expectations and wanting to jump ship and go do this rock and roll series and have and kind of start over, I guess, on something fresh, I can see why. Like he said halfway through season 4 is when they decided that it would end with season 5, but I feel like it's more like hey, Terry, the show's not doing that well. How about we give you 8 episodes and we end it?
Right.
And then we'll dive into the whole shortened season discussion here. But because when it was announced that it was like 8 episodes, Terrence Winter would say, yeah, we found out that, we really only need 8 episodes to finish up. And I'm like, do you though?
Yeah.
Because I feel like you could have gone for 12 or 13.
Oh, yeah.
And, yeah, so what did you think about all that, the shortened season, all that stuff?
Like I said, I was just so detached from it before the season started. I didn't think much of it, but I remember as the season was going, you would often say, like, I can't believe there's only 6 episodes left. I can't believe there's only 5 episodes left. How are they going to wrap this up in 4 episodes? There's 3 episodes,
Yeah.
And I started to feel that rush or that, like, I can't think of the word.
Anxiety?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. But yeah, I started to feel that as well. A sense of urgency. But I didn't start to feel it till like halfway through the season, but yeah, it seemed like they stretched a lot of stuff out in the last season, which was weird because they only had 8 episodes.
Right.
I mean, like the flashbacks were terrific. Some of my favorite scenes of the whole show. Love the flashbacks. Nice. That's total bias because I love flashbacks in general. Right. Thank you, Damon Lindelof. And so I love them, but at the same time, I was like, there's so much other stuff going on. Yeah. And it's like, this is your last season, bro. Like, come on, let's simmer down.
Right.
So yeah, it was just such a strange season. The season just felt so out of place, really, in the context of the show.
Yeah.
It felt really out of place, and I think part of it is the fact that it was only 8 episodes.
Right. And also the time jump.
The time jump is the biggest thing.
Yeah, which I mean, I felt like 8 episodes in those first few episodes before the pressure started to mount. Like, hey, they're ending it pretty soon, and they're spending a lot of time with Nucky figuring out that he's going to become sheriff or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But in those first few episodes, I'm like, this is the show. It felt like pace wise, this was the show that Boardwalk Empire needed to be successful, because it was a lot quicker. Like, you had that first episode was Nucky seeing Lansky in Cuba, and then there being an assassination attempt and putting it together that it was Lansky and Luciano that's behind it and all that. Mm-hmm. And it's just like all that in one episode. And then there's better examples in episodes after that. But like that would stretch like a couple episodes in a normal season. And there was a lot of stuff like that.
And they skipped that entire war. That territory war, basically between Luciano and Lansky and Nucky.
You mean later in the season?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they basically were, like they gathered a bunch of guys at the club and they're like, we're going to go to war, basically. And you literally see no second of it.
They really did. And it's,
which is so against the character of the show.
Yeah. And it's funny because in let's see, it was in season 3 when they went to war against Gyp Rossetti.
Exactly.
They had like
the whole season.
Oh yeah. And when they kind of did the whole like, okay, like basically that same situation in season 3, that episode that ended, I think it was the second to last episode of season 3, where Eli comes back to Atlantic City with reinforcements, and he's like, oh god, that's such a great scene. I'm just gonna repeat it. Where Eli brings back reinforcements from Chicago, and Nucky walks up, sees all the guys, and he sees Eli, and he's like, "Did you struck a deal with Torrio?" And then Eli's like, "No, I struck a deal with him." And then Al Capone comes up,
yeah,
and he's just like, he's got like that grin, and he's got a cigar, and then he's like, I'm gonna butcher the accent, but
you are.
Yeah,
shouldn't
it's
try
like,
it. Really.
I shouldn't. I tried a Harrow impression last year, so I'll try this. It's like, we've been on the. I can't do it. He was like, imagine Stephen Graham. We've been on the road for 18 hours. I need a bath. I need some chow, and then you and me sit down and we talk about who dies. I'm like, that's such a great way to end an episode. And then the following episode, the finale, it opens with just a montage of just death. And it's so beautiful. Mm-hmm. And the counterpoint to that in this season is that the finale opens with, I believe it was the second to the penultimate episode of the series. It opens with basically news coverage.
Yeah.
Which actually I've if I'm not mistaken, I think some of those photos are like actual scenes
they looked like it.
Yeah.
From Turf Wars or whatever.
Yeah. And let's talk, because we got kind of a little bit ahead of ourselves, just a little bit, but let's talk about the time jump.
Mm-hmm.
Before season 5, when they announced that there would be a time jump, 7 years between seasons 4 and season 5, I was so mad because, for one thing, season 4, and I don't know if this is necessarily a popular opinion. It's kind of a little shaky when you ask the fan base of the show, but season 4 could quite possibly be my favorite season of the show.
Nice.
And it's because it's so well put together, and it comes together so well, and it ends on such a strong note for everyone, really. All the storylines kind of just, it's my favorite way that the show takes all these loose threads and ties them together. Because that finale, Farewell Daddy Blues, is just one of my favorite episodes of the series because it resolves everything so well, and there's so many breadcrumbs left that could have led to better storylines. I mean, you have, and I referenced it last year. We referenced it last year in the episode, but I mean, Van Alden and Eli, like they're meeting because Eli's going into exile. He's going to Chicago, and we get a lot of good Eli and Van Alden stuff in season 5. But it also left me thinking, like, they should have got these characters together like 3 seasons ago.
Yeah.
and I felt like that chemistry was just really, really cut down, or that those characters, that arc between those two characters was cut down severely by this time jump in the shortened season. And then also just the whole fact of J. Edgar Hoover and Narcisse.
Oh.
No, and Narcisse. We'll get to Elliot Ness.
Yeah.
And Narcisse at the end of season 4, it was like he flipped him, and it's to go after Marcus Garvey, who's a historical character. But it's also like that just felt like the second that I saw Narcisse in season 5, I'm like, all right, where's Hoover? Where's that thread? But it's just dropped.
Yeah. It's really unfortunate.
It really is.
Yeah, they dropped basically all the story threads.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
In the 4th season.
Yeah. So the time jump. I'll start. Let's go into this. Arnold Rothstein, man. First of all, they skipped so many historical things, and they reference them. I mean, Rothstein his name is passed around, and it's part of the plot for a lot of the season.
Mm-hmm.
But and then like there's Al Capone watching the newsreel that references the St. Valentine's Day massacre, which happened in 29.
Sounds right.
Something like that, where he took out like a bunch of competition or something like that.
Yeah.
And then also Luciano getting the droopy eye and all that stuff, which the story, do you know the story behind that?
I don't.
Okay, it's something like, I think in 28 or 29, he was jumped or something, and they put a bag over his head, threw him in a car, and just like basically damn near killed him. And then he was found, and he survived and all that. And I think that's where the nickname Lucky came from.
I see.
And that's why he had like the kind of droopy eye and all that.
Like nerve damage, probably.
Yeah. So how'd you feel about the time jump and skipping all that stuff?
Yeah, it just threw a wrench into any momentum that they had built with the end of the 4th season. Because you're right, that 4th season finale was such a crescendo that was just beautiful. And they just, the song ended and they went into the next one, and it was just terrible. They just, like I said, they just lost all their momentum. It was, and like I was bummed to not see a lot of the historical stuff too that you had told me about, because I don't know the history of it very well. But I know you've looked at a lot of the special features and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They've mentioned it.
Man, those Blu-rays.
Yeah, but so I wasn't as familiar with it. I think it probably meant more to you than it did to me. But it just totally changed the dynamic of the show.
Yeah.
It was just not a good choice, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only way to put it. It wasn't a good choice.
Oh yeah.
I would have rather had them follow. I think I would have rather had them follow those storylines and just end it. 12 or 13 episodes, just follow those storylines, end those storylines, and that's the end of the series. As opposed to what they did, maybe. I don't know. I
could see them peppering in time jumps throughout a 13-episode season.
Yeah.
Like hitting marks. Maybe not throughout a season, but I mean, because a lot of that stuff is really important historically to the story being told. There's also, this is off the top, this is just from memory. I don't know the history that well, but Nucky Johnson, the historical counterpart to Nucky Thompson, he hosted an Atlantic City conference of all these gangsters that was pretty much the precursor to Luciano. I think it was pretty much the precursor to Luciano wanting to do the syndicate stuff and all that. And it's like this big moment in gangster history, and it's just gone. Now, in season 3, after Jip blows up Babette's show club, Nucky does have like a version of that. And I mean, and I understand that it would be redundant to show the actual one, but it's also, I don't know, it feels a little strange, or it feels a little crappy that they skipped over so much history. I mean, even, hell, the stock market crash.
Yeah.
That's a huge, huge moment.
Right.
And that also is another reason that the time jump was a concern for me, is that not only did it change, or did it do away with a lot of the momentum that the series had built up to that point, it also fundamentally changed the tone and atmosphere of the series. It brought the series from the roaring 20s into the start of the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so nervous about that going in, but in that first episode when Margaret is at work and her boss, I think his name was Bennett, that is one of my favorite scenes of the series.
It was really good.
Like he's doing this big motivational speech talking about how he saw, like, he's like, yeah, I saw a picture with a movie, last night, and the cartoon before it was this, and it was inspired hope and all that stuff. Or it's like this very, very rousing morale boost thing, and then he just takes out a pistol and shoots himself in the head.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, that is such a great way to establish this new era for the characters, because they're not in an age of decadence anymore,
right?
And it was so effective.
Yeah, there was such a cultural shift.
Yeah,
during that time period.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So season 5. First of all, before season 5 started, I had been buying up all, like I mentioned last year, I bought up all the seasons on DVD, on Blu-ray. Actually, I waited to buy season 4, and I actually got it with an Amazon gift card you got me for my birthday.
Aww.
Yeah. So I actually pre-ordered it, and man, Amazon's great. So anyway, so I basically sat down a month before the season 5 premiere and was like, I'm going to rewatch the entire series. And that's exactly what I did.
You did.
Yes. And I wrote reviews on obsessiveviewer.com, links in the show notes. But it's very interesting to watch that show from the beginning, in such a quick time frame, because it's a show that sits with you. And even though I knew all the big moments and everything, I saw how they tied together. It was like looking into the code of the Matrix, because I could see everything, all the pieces moving and everything. And and I knew very early on, I was like, it felt so weird that they were jumping 7 years in the future. And in season, like, as early as season 1, there are just overt references to The Godfather. And Terrence Winter has said in interviews, like, yes, I plan on making references to The Godfather any chance I get, because it's The Godfather. And then I started thinking about Godfather Part 2 and knowing that there was going to be flashbacks and in the new season. And I was just like, Tommy Darmody is going to come back and kill Nucky at the end of the series.
Yeah, but dude, you predicted it even more perfectly.
Did.
Because you said that it was going to be Tommy Darmody interspersed with scenes from flashbacks of Nucky.
Yeah.
Basically picking up Gillian.
Right.
I was like, you called it to a frickin' T, bro.
I did. And I am someone who is so, like, if you listen to that episode last year, I talk about how I was so sure that, oh yeah, Richard Harrow is going to be the new, like, muscle for Nucky.
Yeah.
And I was way off base. And so much with shows, I'm so off base with everything.
Yeah.
And so when I hit something so much on the head like that, it doesn't sit well with me. And what sucked is that I came to that theory because I felt like it had been a while since I saw Godfather Part 2, which I forgot that we have a Gangsters Movies episode coming up on the podcast, don't we? I got to prep for that. Anyway, so I'm really excited.
I can tell.
Yeah. Because I've been just steeped in Boardwalk Empire, and I'm like, it makes me want to seek out all these other works. But anyway, so when I came to that idea, I was like, yeah, I think Tommy did, because the timeline will match up. He'll be old enough to where he'll be in his mid-teens. He'll probably be pissed that his dad's dead. He'll probably be upset that well, I don't think I really put together that he would have Gillian on his mind or anything like that. But just I don't know. And then when the season started, episode 3, I think, is where Travis Tope's character, Joe Harper / Tommy Darmody, is introduced, and they made it just so obvious from the start. And it was so disappointing to me because his first scene, Mickey is going up to a group of vagrants and is like, "Hey, who wants to make some money?" And then as soon as he says it's for, like, who wants to work for Nucky Thompson, like, you see Joe jump up and he's like, "Yeah, how about me?" And he's like making a case. I'm like, yeah, and he has the same mannerisms as Michael Pitt. This is Tommy Darmody.
They were hitting us over the head with it.
They really were. And then there was
so that's really uncharacteristic of the show.
Yeah.
And it's just really heavy-handed.
It really is.
It's not something I would have expected from the show at all.
Yeah.
And like I remember when after that episode aired, you were like, "So what did you think about that scene at the end with Doyle asking for volunteers?" I was like, "I don't know. I didn't really think of it that much." And then you were like, "What about the kid at the end who like volunteered and they like seemed to focus on it a lot?" I was like, "Yeah, that was kind of weird." And he's like, "Do you have any theories about who that might be?" And I was like, "Tommy Darmody?" And you were like, "Yeah."
Yeah, seriously.
They were hitting us over the head with it, but like I said, I'm just so detached from the show. I didn't pick up on it. But as soon as you said something, I was like, "That's Tommy freaking Darmody."
Yeah. And it's like, it's not so much that they did it. Okay,
I like the fact that they did it. I thought it was a really cool way to end it, but you just saw it coming from a mile away.
Yeah.
That was the problem.
Yeah, and maybe I'm clouded by the fact that I saw it coming I saw it coming before season 5 even aired.
Yeah.
That maybe that's clouding my appreciation of it. And I will say that I rewatched that scene like 2 or 3 times before even posting my review of the episode. I think I even referenced this in the review. I'm like, I've seen this like 3 times now, and it's a really, really incredible scene.
It is.
It's a beautiful scene. But the problem is just like they hit us over the head. They had that. They had the scene where Doyle. It was a lot of fun having like Doyle play off him and stuff throughout, and like Mickey play off of him throughout the season.
Play with him,
but God damn it. It was really
try to do his laugh. I can't do his laugh.
I can't
that little
either.
chuckle he does.
It's so great though.
It is.
But Paul Sparks is amazing. But
yeah.
They had scenes between those two, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. I like the character, I like the dynamic that they're setting up. But there are scenes where he's like, where Mickey makes a reference to the kid's mother, to the kid's parents. He's like, yeah, your father sold me your mother or whatever, something like that. And it's like it's just a throwaway line, a joke, just something to get a rise out of him. And then not Tommy Darmody is like. He's like, my father? It's like, dude. And then there's the whole thing of like, when he first meets Nucky, he's like, yeah, I'm Joe Harper. And and Travis Tope is amazing. He
was good.
He was so good in this show. And he's good in Men, Women, and Children. He's good in, The Town That Dreaded Sundown. He's a really good actor. And I'm really looking forward to his career from here on out. But it's just the writing.
Yeah. And I think, of those 3 performances you just listed, I think Boardwalk's probably his best performance.
I think so too.
Well, I haven't seen Town That Dreaded Sundown,
right?
But I can't imagine it's better than the other 2,
right?
But when you think about what he did, he came in the last season of a heavy hitting show like this with some top notch freaking actors, and just hung with them every step of the way. That's really impressive for such a young guy. It
really is.
I was really impressed with him.
Yeah. And he, just, but it's just the fact that he came in, like, I made the remark, like, okay, if they wanted to include him in, like, if they wanted to clue us into it, they could have done it so much differently. They could have had him, it's 7 years in the future from season 4. He could have been a character that's just part of that outfit from the start. They didn't need to show him showing up and going there.
Oh yeah.
They could have just been like, oh hey, Mickey's got a little buddy.
A little more cloak and dagger with it.
Yeah, and it's and it just like there's even in the episode, the second to last episode of the series, I think, there's a shot, and I posted this in my review, and someone posted it on Reddit also, that there is a scene where Mickey hands Joe/Tommy a gun, and Nucky sees him. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing?" Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you freeze frame it, it's literally the gun is pointing right at Nucky. It's like it's in Joe's hand. It's pointing at. It's like a visual cue that is so overt. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even, and we haven't even talked about the whole the thing about, and we're all over the place. But.
Just like the last season.
Pretty much. And we haven't even talked about like Nucky waking up after being beaten up by those two women. Mm-hmm. That just sounds so goofy.
It does.
But him waking up and seeing Joe and being like referring to him as if he's Gillian. It's like, you can't get more obvious than that.
Right. Right. And it's funny that you mentioned that when we talk about how heavy-handed it was and how they were hitting us over the head with it. Mm-hmm. My parents both watched this show, and they've watched it from the beginning, and we talk about it every once in a while. And so before the finale, we were having dinner, and we were talking about it, and I was like, yeah, Matt has this whole theory. I was like, the guy who's kind of helping out Doyle, his name's Joe Harper, and they're like, oh, yeah, the young guy and stuff. I was like, Matt has this theory that he's Tommy Darmody, and I told them the whole theory. They were like, wow, like they didn't have that inclination at all. Like it was.
You just you ruined the finale for them.
Yeah, I think I did. But you look awesome. You look brilliant.
Totally.
So it's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, so maybe the average viewer didn't see it coming.
Maybe you've got to be an obsessive viewer. That's so lame.
Really?
Yeah. I don't even have alcohol to. I don't even have alcohol or sleep deprivation to make up for that, as an excuse. But yeah. So okay, let's get this back on track. Let's table that discussion for a bit. We'll save Nucky's arc through the season for like kind of last.
Okay.
But let's go through each of the different like arenas of combat, arenas of narrative. Like, so let's start with Chicago. Mm-hmm. Al Capone, Van Alden, Eli.
Yeah.
Go.
I felt like throughout the season, Capone was not that interesting.
Really?
He hit some huge marks in the finale, but throughout the season, I just didn't find him all that interesting, really. Because he was just too much of a stereotype.
Huh.
I mean, Al Capone is the stereotype. I mean, you know what I mean? So he had to play it that way. There's no other way to play it. I'm just saying, you knew it was just so predictable, and you just knew what was going to happen. You know what kind of character you're dealing with. But the whole Van Alden and Eli dynamic made it watchable and made it funny. And, that was like, it was like almost like a buddy comedy.
I was just going to say, I think in one of my reviews I references like they have the best buddy comedy movie and it's on HBO or something.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what that felt like. And, the two actors, Michael Shannon and Shea Wiggum. Is that his name? Shea Wiggum?
Yep.
Yeah. They were just great together.
Yeah.
And I mean, they really hadn't had but a couple scenes together the whole series, really?
Right. I think the only scene, maybe two scenes in season one. There was one scene where it was after, if you remember, season one, first episode, Jimmy and Capone take out five guys. They take out five guys in the woods. It's the big inciting incident for the series, pretty much. It's the one that they pinned on Margaret's husband at the end of the premiere. But one of the guys is alive, and one of the guys is alive, and so the second episode is about them keeping him alive, or trying to kill him and all that. And Van Alden is, Eli's the sheriff, he's in the room with the guy, he's trying to smother him, and then Van Alden walks in.
That's right.
And it's such a great scene.
Yeah. So yeah, it was fun seeing them together for this last season.
It was so great.
They worked together incredibly well.
Why must there always be pandemonium?
Yeah, one of the highlights of the season was those two together. But just Chicago in general, up until the finale, I just didn't find it all
That's
that interesting for some reason. I don't know. I much preferred Luciano and Siegel and Lansky in New York. I liked what they were doing, setting up the syndicate and battling with Nucky.
Yeah.
I found that more interesting. The whole Chicago storyline was just tying up storylines.
And I think what I liked so much about it is I like the history of just like Capone and stuff a lot more.
There just wasn't much history there though in the show.
Well, yeah.
It was basically just Capone in an office being loud and obnoxious.
And that's one of the things that I don't know if this is budgetary reasons or just a lack of need for changing in scenery or whatever, but he's in that suite the entire season.
Yeah.
So that was a little stale, but
yeah.
I felt like it was really great at illustrating his erratic behavior and it built up to eventually Van Alden's end, which I think we should set aside time specifically to talk about just the character deaths this season, but we'll do that later after this whole regional thing, geography thing. But I felt like it was a really good representation of his erratic behavior, and that led to a lot of tension later in the season. And it was just a really, seeing Stephen Graham take that character and make him I thought he did just a great performance throughout the whole series.
Oh yeah, I take nothing away from him.
Yeah, and this season was like the overdrive thing. He's a coked out guy and they didn't explore this and everything, but he eventually. Did you read how Al Capone actually ended up?
No.
Really? Well, let me give you a history lesson. Al Capone goes to prison. He finds out that he has syphilis, severe syphilis, and it's it rooted in it reaches his brain, and
wow.
he his mental faculties basically degrade, and it ends he died maybe 10 years later. He was in prison, left prison. There's a story. I don't know how true this is. I don't know how true this is, but there's stories that when after prison, he had the mental doctors diagnosed his brain activity as he had the mental capacity of a 12-year-old.
Jeez.
That's how much the syphilis rotted his brain. And there's stories of him sitting by the pool with a fishing pole in his home.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's just it's something that, and his whole, there's on Wikipedia, if you Wikipedia Al Capone and go to where it says prison and after prison and death, read that and imagine that in a montage with Stephen Graham, and just it something about it just brings it together for me.
That's fair.
Yeah, and so yeah, but the shining part of the Chicago storyline was the relationship between Van Alden and Eli.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this. I felt kind of dumb, or ill-informed, because I was so excited because at the start of the season I was like, so Al Capone this is right before Al Capone it's going to be the Al Capone story. He's going to go to jail and all that.
His downfall. And
I'm like, Elliot Ness.
Yeah.
I was under the impression he was a big part of that. And it turns out that he was a PR person. It was the whole Untouchables story. That's just a fabrication. That's not how it happened.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I did not know that. I just assumed that he was that was history.
Yeah.
But apparently it's not. And I love that I retroactively loved that they called attention to that they made a little wink to that, because the only time you see Ness is
talking to press.
There's one scene with an HBO alum, Jim True Frost from The Wire, where he's talking to the press. He's saying I'm going to go after Al Capone, and then the only other reference to Elliot Ness throughout the entire season is Eli talking out of his ass after, but either before, right before or right after Van Alden gets shot in the head.
Yeah.
It's he's Ness turned us and all that to save his ass. But
fucking Kevin Costner.
Right?
Not a fan of Kevin Costner.
Yeah, me neither. I'm going to see the show, though, for the Gangsters episode. I think, probably. So, yeah, the Chicago storyline was cool. I liked it probably more than you did, Tiny. But to each their own.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mentioned last year in the episode that, and I hope I'm not talking too much over you or anything like that, but I mentioned in last year's episode that I was so interested in the Capone story that I wanted a spinoff with Capone.
Yeah.
But reading about, or like seeing Luciano, Lansky, and Bugsy Siegel doing all that, I'm like, man, if they did a spinoff with them, and like especially with like Bugsy with like Siegel in like Vegas and how like the mob just built Vegas pretty much, that would be such a cool show.
Yeah.
And I think, and I don't know the history that well, but I mean, I just assume like, well, you know, all of the organized crime was kind of working together. Like the whole syndicate thing was kind of, there wasn't really that much drama between them, I don't think.
Yeah.
In the start of Vegas. Like I think like there's people saying like, yeah, Vegas was a lot better when the mob ran it. But I mean there is like, do you know what happened with Bugsy Siegel?
Didn't he eventually make it out to LA? Or am I thinking of someone else?
No.
Okay.
He and Lansky like go way back. They're like BFFs. And then Meyer Lansky basically, and they kind of hint at this in season 2 of Boardwalk Empire, 2 or 3. Like one of the first scenes that you see Bugsy Siegel in, Benny Siegel in the show. He's running the backroom card table for Lansky and Luciano, but you see him like a very subtle peek at him like stealing some of the chips. So he basically, I think he built the Flamingo Hotel in Vegas. I think.
Okay.
And like he was an integral part of like casinos and stuff there, but he basically, the story goes, this is from memory from a Wikipedia article, so I mean do your own research if you're interested in this, don't take my word for it, but there was like 3 instances in like 40s or 50s I think where Bugsy Siegel was caught stealing from the casino, like taking money from the casino, and like the whole like the group that was like in charge of everything was like talking to Meyer Lansky, and was like, so Lansky, so Meyer, he kind of stole from us. We need to, you know, kill him. He's like, no, he's a friend. It's okay, you know, all that. 3 times this happens, and then finally, like the 3rd time, I think he wrestled with it, but Lansky was like, all right, you gotta take him out, and he ended up getting murdered for it.
Wow.
And I think that there was like Lansky lived to like his 80s or something, and wow. I think there was something that he said. He said something about how he really regretted that Siegel died or something. He basically implied like he was involved in the hit or involved in
making the decision.
Yeah. So I mean that would be so cool to see in a show.
It would. They really would. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
But bringing it back to Boardwalk, I really liked the sentiment of Luciano wanting to start the syndicate, and as a byproduct of that, taking out all the old bosses and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
is that historically accurate too?
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like the scene, where he kills Mazzaria, that's like a real, like that happened.
Okay.
The Maranzana's death isn't exactly how it happened, but I mean, I think it's pretty historically accurate. Well, it's definitely not exactly how it happened because a fictional character shot him in the head in the show because Eli shot him in the head.
Yeah.
And Eli's not, no. Anyway, but I liked it. I liked that it brought some good tension to it, and it kind of really brought forth the theme of the season, which was that Nucky doesn't really belong anymore. He's
old news.
Yeah, there's new blood in gangsterism,
organized crime,
and it's pushing the old blood out. I mean, it's just whatever.
I liked the New York Story stuff a lot more.
Yeah,
the New York guys. Yeah, that's just, the guy who plays Bugsy Siegel's freaking amazing.
My God,
I loved him.
Michael Z something.
I can't remember.
Yeah,
but he's also HBO alum. He was in Girls.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was he also in the show Girls? Sorry. How is he in Girls? Because I still haven't seen that show, and I don't really want to.
He's annoying as shit, and I wanted to backhand him, just like every other frickin' character in that show.
Nice.
Ugh. God, that show. The New York storylines are a lot more enjoyable. Everything was just so rushed.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it would have been nice to see it play out a little more thoroughly.
Yeah.
Thoroughly.
The thing with Luciano's stuff, I liked it a lot, but it kind of seemed like he was floating around the whole the season. He was floating around and kind of repeating the same thing, like, we need to make a syndicate.
Yeah.
We need to get a commission. We need to get rid of the bosses.
Yeah. I don't remember the context, but the scene was they were the three of them were meeting some guy at a whorehouse, basically. Mm-hmm. The place where they would set up shop a lot.
Yeah. It wasn't to the guy that got killed, was it? The guy that
No.
Okay. Anyway,
they were meeting somebody, but like the other guy got there way earlier. Mm-hmm. And like they were waiting for him.
Yeah.
He's like, I was getting my knob polished. Yeah. But Luciano, just the way that he says it, like Luciano had that typical stance where he's got one hand in his pocket, he's got a cigarette in the other hand, and he was like, what are you, 14? It's like the way he said it, it was so great. I was like, what are you, 14? I just love that. It was so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I liked that. I liked that storyline, and I liked that how it ended too. It was really cool. Although the actual scene of the commission, the first meeting of the commission, it kind of, like, again, it was like, Luciano's been spouting off this whole idea.
It was anticlimactic.
Yeah, it really was.
So many events in this last season were very anticlimactic.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. And it was just like he was just repeating it, and it was I was all like, that's it.
Yeah.
But let's move along to Chalky's storyline.
Yeah.
I liked it. I did. I liked it. But I felt like it was just really, I think it lacked a certain focus.
Anticlimactic.
Yeah. Like, when we first see him, we see, oh, wow, he's in prison. Okay. Oh, wow, he's escaped prison. Why was he in prison?
Right.
Oh, he came back to Nucky. Oh, it turns out he was in prison for just knocking off some stores and stuff because he was on the run or something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the whole season, I'm like, okay, so basically, and this doesn't really work with the timeline of the show. It doesn't really work with the structure of the show. Although maybe it kind of does. There was a whole thing where the end of season 4, Eli killed Brian Garrity's character, James Tolliver, the Hoover's inside man. He killed him, so that made Eli have to go on the run to go to Chicago. When Hoover meets with Narcisse to flip him, he's like, an agent was just murdered, and he says plainly, like, we need a black guy to take the fall for it, so that we can use that to get to Garvey, to Marcus Garvey and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So all I'm thinking is, okay, when I see Chalky in prison, immediately I think, okay, 7 years ago, Narcisse, they pinned the murder of Tolliver onto, I think that's his name, onto Chalky, and that's why Chalky's in prison. And that would have given so much more weight to the revenge story. Mm-hmm. As it played out, but that's not what it was, and I mean, I guess it doesn't really fit because then Eli wouldn't really have a reason to still be in Chicago. Then again, once he comes back to Atlantic City and Nucky sees him, Nucky's like, why are you here? What, like, so it could have been like, well, maybe Nucky would have killed him, if he came back. But anyway, so Chalky goes through this whole kind of meanders through this revenge story.
Yeah.
And it was compelling enough because it was Michael K. Williams, but it was also a misuse of Michael K. Williams.
Oh yeah.
And
the character.
Yeah, oh yeah. And we'll get to our what I'll call our To the Lost segment. But we'll talk about how that ended here in a bit also. But see that. Let's talk about the flashbacks, and let's talk about Gillian first. Sorry.
Okay.
Gillian's storyline was integral to the season, obviously. A lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people thought it was too disconnected.
And it was so vague.
It was.
I didn't care for it either.
Really?
Yeah.
I think that I just like her so much as a character. I find her story so compelling and tragic that I was really into it just because, like, she is there because of Nucky. Like, indirectly, she's there because Nucky turned her over pimped her out to the Commodore.
Yeah.
And that started this whole long line of things. Sure, she murdered an innocent guy.
Yeah. A little bit.
Which is a little crazy.
Banged her own son. But that's also that's all part of the whole story of Nucky. They're tied together so closely. She's damaged goods.
She is. And it was so just not heartbreaking, but just really sad to see her in a situation where she's at the end of everything. Like, she's got nothing. And the Dr. Cotton, the doctor, he's a historical character.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a show called The Nick.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I know that.
I was like, are you being sarcastic?
Clive Owen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess Dr. Cotton is a character in the show.
Huh, okay.
But his big shtick was that he felt that insanity could be cured through surgery.
Ooh.
So that's why they had basically just, horrible surgeries where he would take out organs and take stuff out of women in the sanitarium. And
I love science.
Yeah. And it's just like, and that's one of the things that I felt like they could have made Nucky and Gillian's meeting in the finale a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Or a little more, like, her mind is clearly gone. She's already had the operation. He's too late. He can't do anything. He wasn't going to do anything. To get her out of there after she reached out to him, which we'll get to, I guess. But it's also like, I kind of wish they would have gone like full lobotomy on it.
Yeah.
and kind of really hit home the tragedy of it all.
Right.
But I thought her time in the sanitarium was compelling. Maybe a little too much time was spent. But
really?
like showing her in it and everything.
Nah.
Really? Oh, okay.
She maybe had like 6 or 8 scenes. They showed her maybe
like
once. I don't even know about once per episode they showed her.
Oh yeah, there were episodes where she wasn't in it.
Yeah, so it was just too vague, too unaddressed. I really didn't like it at all.
Okay.
I thought it was disturbing, the whole doctor wanting to just remove. Yeah, that was disturbing. That was cool, but just super disconnected from the storyline, really.
Right.
I didn't really care for it.
Yeah. Margaret, what did you think about her?
I really didn't. I don't know. Like, by themselves, they're not bad storylines.
Right.
But they're just, everything seems so disjointed, and like everything was really rushed, and some of it was just so vague and nondescript that it was just like, well, this is one of the most major characters from the show, so we have to do something.
Yeah.
Let's just do this. And you could just feel it the whole season.
Yeah.
And that was with everybody. That was with Chalky, with Gillian, with Margaret, with freaking Al Capone, with everybody. It was just, it was just so thrown together.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
I thought that Kelly MacDonald was her most likable in the series. And I think that her character was written like to be likable this season. Likable this season. Because I mean, Margaret Thompson, Margaret Schroeder, whatever, she's not, there's always been kind of a disconnect with her character. Her storyline in season 2 involved her. Maybe it was season 3. Her with the hospital. It was season 3. Her with the hospital with the sex ed program thing. Pretty much the all that prenatal care stuff.
Yeah.
It was interesting, and it provided a good historical context for the season, but it also felt a little lost, a little weird.
Right. It was just a vehicle for Nucky making a bunch of money in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then in this, are you talking about this season?
Yeah.
Okay, I was confused.
Her storyline this season, yeah.
Yeah, and it was, I liked that there was some good character stuff between the two of them. There was some good chemistry.
Yeah.
And she was like, I'll just say it, she was really hot this season. Like, I was just like, that's like, yeah, this is a Margaret I could get behind. I was gonna say, I was gonna say get behind, and then I was gonna go so much farther. And
wow.
Yeah. Anyway, and it somehow made it even worse that I paused right before I said that. But anyway, she was good in those scenes, and I liked her back and forth with Joseph Kennedy and all that stuff. But I don't know. I thought that, sure, probably a little bit less time could have been spent.
Yeah.
On her, and I like that they tried to at least make Arnold Rothstein matter to the show.
Yeah.
Post-mortem.
To the last season, yeah.
Yeah, but it still kind of felt like they kind of dropped it a little bit, or they kind of fumbled it a little bit, or made it not interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're kind of running through all these threads. Let's get to the Nucky of it all. Past and present, really.
Yeah. That was his storyline with the flashbacks. My favorite part of the season by far.
Nice. Very nice.
It was just great. I mean, it was stuff that they had mentioned in passing in the previous seasons, just lines of dialogue like, oh, Nucky was the sheriff at one point. And, oh, he delivered Gillian to the Commodore, and it was just mentioned in passing, but we don't have much. Just sort of, they were stories used for context. They weren't very specific, and so to see them played out, even though we know what was going to happen, just informed the characters so much. The characters that we had come to know. Yeah. That I just latched onto it, and just any time that they just snapped back to young Nucky, I was like, all right, that
nice.
That really caught my attention and kept me going throughout the last season. Yeah, that was really well done.
Nice.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot. I liked the flashbacks a lot. I thought that they gave some really great background on Nucky. A lot. It made gave him more of a three-dimensional character trait, and his motivation throughout the entire series, as it were, it kind of came to light because it showed his origin. Like his family life was horrible. He latched onto the idea of working for the Commodore because he was in pursuit of like riches and power and all that. But I also felt like that in itself, this whole idea that was kind of presented, not necessarily out of nowhere, but it was presented in its clearest form in this season, that Nucky is a money-hungry guy who, as Joe Harper / Tommy Darmody said, money is his answer to everything.
Yeah.
And that kind of felt like they were scrambling to find his big character flaw. Last season,
I don't know.
Well, okay, last season, in season 4, it felt like, okay, let me go back further, actually. Season 2 ended with Nucky killing Jimmy. And it was his first time killing someone. It was a big moment, because this is the character that told him in the pilot episode, you can't be half a gangster. And this is basically him becoming a full-on gangster. And then season 3 had some, it opened with him being more ruthless. It opened with them beating the hell out of this guy tied to a chair who stole from him.
Yeah.
And so, in like the way that I remember the scene ending up is that he's talking very cool, very casual with him. He's like, "Oh yes, okay, so you're a thief, and I guess your job is a thief. That's understand. I understand. And Mickey, what's your job? Your job is to run the warehouse and all that. And you left the door unlocked. You didn't do your job." And so he kind of gets this guy into this false sense of security. And he's like, "Oh yeah, go ahead and untie him, and then shoot his fucking brains out." And they murder him. They kill him.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. And it's also somewhat repeated later in the season because he's in a warehouse with this kid who they've found all of their stolen liquor. Actually, now that I think of it, he's actually the second guy of that first guy. Like it was a 2-man operation. They finally found that guy. Uh-huh. But anyway, so they find him. They have an entire bottle episode that a lot of people weren't really that crazy about, where he and Owen are basically trapped in this warehouse while the feds and the Prohees are sweeping it for them. And so they're talking. The kid's a charismatic little kid, like 15 years old. Mm-hmm. He's very charming and all that stuff. And then he's like, he basically agrees. Like Nucky's like, yeah, maybe you can work for me or whatever. And then, I just remember that scene. They're both really cool scenes, but Owen's just like, all right, yeah, I guess he's gonna work for us. So Owen looks out the window and is like, all right, well, Eddie's pulling up or whatever. And then the kid's like, who's Eddie? And then just before he can even finish saying it, Nucky just pulls the trigger and shoots his head off. And it's just from season 2 to season 3, it's like a big jump. Nucky is just a gangster guy, but then that kind of falls off. Season 4, it's this weird, in between where he's like, well, I don't really feel like being a gangster anymore. I kind of want to get out. And it's kind of just this abrupt kind of change of character, change of heart for the character. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of muddled. So I feel like going into season 5, it's like, okay, well, we couldn't really make him, he didn't really fit in as a gangster. He wasn't really, now he wants to get out and be legitimate, but okay, well, he has these young gangsters going after him, so that's some good stuff. You know what? Why don't we make his whole arc for the series be him being greedy? And I mean, I know that that's a very obtuse way to look at it, I guess, or whatever, but it's also, that's just how I felt about it. It was kind of the show was a character study of Nucky that became an ensemble, and in the process, they lost sight of the story of Nucky that they were telling. Nucky became a less popular storyline in the show, and because of that, they lacked a focus on what his character arc was.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, you just kind of nailed that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I can't really add to that.
Yeah. So, and I mean, I don't mind that they established this whole greedy side to him, because I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it fits. I mean, it's kind of a broad kind of stroke.
Yeah.
A broad stroke kind of character trait, and it fits well with the series because he's always been wanting to get more money. He's always been wanting to do more, even though he's at the end of a lot of times he's like, why at the end of season 3 when he's talking to Eli, he's like, why did we make this get so big, and why did we they have this really good scene where they're working on a car outside of the warehouse where they're hiding out from Jip Rossetti and his guys, and they're like, why did we get this so big, and why is this operation so big? He actually says, why are they doing this so much? And it's that's not really something that someone whose arc throughout the series is greed and wanting all the monies. That's not something that one of those characters would say. It's something that, I don't know. It's hard to explain. Well, I explained it, but.
Right.
So yeah, but anyway, the flashbacks were great. Because it showed some much needed, just background on the character. And like you said, there were stuff shown that we've known about and that they've talked about. The stuff with his father, his dying sister,
his wife, which that in the finale was kind of weird to me. Yeah.
Because in season 1, there's this great, this is the scene that should have gotten Steve Buscemi and Emmy. He's talking to Margaret, episode 9 of season 1, I think. he's talking to Margaret, and Margaret's like wanting him to speak to him, like be open and honest with him and stuff like that. And he basically recounts to her the story of Mabel and the kid, Enoch Jr., he basically, they had the baby, and I can't remember exactly, but it was something like she got really distant from him, from Nucky, and he was busy or something, and he came back, and she was very strange, and it turns out that he had died, that the baby had died in the crib, and she had been caring for him for like 2 days, and he started to like rot and stuff like that and smell, and she had an emotional breakdown and ended up killing herself. Mm-hmm. So when they showed her pregnant in the show, in the flashbacks, I was like, okay, this is kind of weird for the time frame, because I thought that was later, but maybe they're gonna, jump ahead a little bit and show that at the end too. Mm-hmm. But then they had that scene where it's basically implying that it's a miscarriage and all that, which makes sense because maybe they'll try more, and it's the implication that they'll try more, and everything is evident. But it kind of seemed a little weird to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But and the stuff with young Gillian was really good too in the flashbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And,
yeah, it was.
Yeah, and Mark Pickering, I think is his name, the guy that plays young, like Deputy Thompson. Mm-hmm. Dead ringer for Steve Buscemi.
He was remarkably good.
Yeah, and just the nuances of his performance, like he got to the meat of Buscemi's performance, mm-hmm. and it was so strong.
Yeah,
and like you said with Travis Tope, I mean, he came in, took the reins of a character that we've had for 4 seasons,
right,
and all that, and he just knocked it out of the park. And the younger version of him by Nolan Lyons, I think is his name. He was great too. Mm-hmm. But Mark Pickering is the one that really shined.
Yeah,
in the flashbacks,
definitely.
Yeah. So let's get to just the deaths, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, because we're probably gonna want to end this up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Let's just run through them pretty much.
Yeah.
This isn't really in
kind of like they did on the show.
Pretty much. This isn't really in any. This is in just order of how I wasn't that interested in Rosanna Arquette.
Yeah. Patricia
Arquette. Rosanna Arquette. Is that another actress?
Yeah.
Yeah. Patricia Arquette. I wasn't really that interested in her character death. It felt like they were just
Didn't care.
Yeah, it kind of felt like a throwaway thing. Like, okay, well, we need to trim the cast a little bit.
Yeah. We've only got 8 episodes. Let's just get rid of this one.
Yeah. Get
rid of this character.
And I mean, and she was a strong character, and I didn't really like the character that much from season 4. Mm-hmm. But I mean, she was integral to Nucky's Cuban deal and all that stuff.
Right.
But yeah, God, there's a lot of death.
Yeah.
Totino, whatever. The guy that Nucky met with in like episode 2 or 3. He was the one that was getting his knob polished.
Okay.
I think he's the one that Archie ends up cutting his ear off and delivering him to. That was such a cool scene.
Yeah.
They dropped the body off outside of Luciano and Lansky, and he's got he's got his ear cut off and a knife in his like chest or something that pins a postcard or whatever from Cuba.
Yeah.
But yeah, so his death was cool because he's a character that was. It's funny to me because I don't know if you remember, Tiny, but season 3 he was like Jip Rossetti's like right hand man.
Yeah.
And he basically turned on Jip because Jip murdered his cousin with a shovel after burying him up to his neck in sand.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, such a cool scene. But anyway, so he turned on Jip, and then he basically, Nucky even references it in this season, that he's like, yeah, your allegiance really isn't, you kind of wander around or whatever. So he gets him to explain to him that Luciano is coming after him, But what I loved about it is that they're in a diner or a restaurant and stuff, and like Nucky's bodyguard is standing by and all that, and then they're like talking and everything, and then Nucky gets up after the conversation's done, and he hands some money to the waiter, and the waiter comes up and whispers, I think he says something to the guy, and he like points to a drawing of Billy Kent, the showgirl that got blowed up in season 3.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's so cool because you're like, okay, well, yeah, you know that he's dead. Like, he's dead now because, you know, this is all revenge for that. But, so anyway, so that death was cool. Archie and Mickey in the penultimate episode. Archie being the bodyguard and Mickey, of course, being Mickey. I thought that was a proper send-off for Mickey because
it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to make a deal at the worst possible time. And I love that Luciano's just, like he said, like, shut the fuck up, and then shot him. It's like Mickey Doyle is a character that needed to be shot in the throat to die. Like, shooting him in the throat is the proper way for that character to die. Yeah. What did you think about Chalky's death? It's a big point of contention for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah. It just seemed very meaningless. Just meaningless. I mean, his life didn't have much meaning at that point because he had lost everything, literally everything in his life. But still, I think his death could have meant something.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it did to an extent. He kind of worked out that deal with Narcisse that he would do whatever for daughter Maitland.
Yeah.
But it seemed like, I don't know, it seemed a little useless, and I hate to keep harping on this term, but anticlimactic.
Yeah. It did. It was trimming the cast, like I said, and it happened in an episode that also saw the death of Van Alden. So it was like both major characters from the beginning of the series were killed off in separate storylines, and it was kind of like they were competing a little bit for our just responses, our reaction.
Yeah.
And it was also, I mean, yeah, sure, he ensured the future of daughter and his estranged, or his illegitimate daughter, heavily implied. But it's also like he didn't get the revenge he was seeking, and I mean, I understand maybe that's not the point, that him not getting the revenge is to show growth of him, because wanting vengeance or wanting to kill Narcisse is what got his daughter killed in the first place, and it's character growth for him. But it's also like, you know, just I don't know,
do something better.
Yeah, and it's ultimately kind of meaningless because Narcisse gets killed off in a couple episodes after that.
So again, so needlessly. Yeah, and it's just basically it was just Luciano's crew tying up loose ends, right?
Yeah,
that's basically all it was.
And it was the writers telegraphing that so hard because they tried to make it seem like, oh, are they going to put a hit out on Nucky? But it's like,
yeah, that was so heavy-handed.
It was like ham-fisted, yeah. And it was just like yeah, just get two guys, do it in broad daylight, so that they get the message. And then it's like, oh, is it going to be Nucky? And I'm like, I think at the time I was writing notes for the review that I wrote, and I was like, okay, and like in the notes, I was like, they're clearly trying to get us to think that they're going after Nucky, but I'm like, no, because I mean, he already gave them Atlantic City. I mean, whatever. So that, and then who else?
Stephen Wright just had a whole. That's the actor, right? Stephen Wright? No,
Right? No. Which actor?
Narcisse.
Oh, Jeffrey Wright.
Jeffrey Wright.
Yeah.
Had such a lackluster season.
He did.
Not to his discredit, to the writer's discredit.
Honestly, if it wasn't for the loose end of Chalky seeking revenge and not tying up that, or if it wasn't for the fact that they needed to tie up a major character, like Chalky as a major character, there was no reason to have Narcisse in the season.
Exactly.
Yeah, especially since they weren't going to follow through with the storyline that they embedded in the season 4 finale with him.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Van Alden probably had my favorite death of the season. Which I can sense that you weren't that impressed.
Yeah, it's anticlimactic. He had his little, he spouted off his little proselytization at the end there. I am Van Alden, whatever the hell he said. But then, I don't know. Whatever.
I gotta disagree with you. I loved that scene.
Really?
Yeah, because it encompasses exactly what Van Alden is. He is, and I said last year he was like a caged animal in all of season 3 and all that stuff, but it's more that he is a guy who's struggling with his like very aggressively religious religious and authority figure kind of thing from when he was a prohibition agent, and from then after that it's kind of like he's just neutered throughout the whole series, and there's little bits and pieces where it's like he flirts with becoming a gangster, and he gets, for lack of a better word, picked on by coworkers at his little sales agency and stuff, and he lashes out like a little bit. Like there's a scene where the iron scene with the character that he ends up killing a season later or whatever, where he presses the iron to the guy's face. They filmed it like it looks like onlookers of an exotic animal exhibit. It's like they're in fear because he's like an animal, but he keeps going back to just being neutered and being like this caged beast and all that. And then yeah. And then this season it was like, okay, he knows that he's gonna die. He might as well unleash Van Alden on Al Capone.
But he doesn't. He should have had a blaze of glory death, and that was just he yelled a little bit and got executed essentially.
That's about as much of a blaze of glory death as I think they could have done with him. Because in that situation, at least, because I felt like that was a and I said in the review for that episode that, man, Shea Wiggum almost overshadowed him, his big moment, because if you remember Shea Wiggum, Eli's like, he's like,
yeah, I remember, yeah, his like, reaction to it,
yeah, it was great, but I don't know, I loved it.
But you mentioned all these things that were amazing, the iron to the guy's face, and when he killed a bunch of people, when he drowned the other Proby agent that was working with him in season 1, that was some blaze of glory type literally taking people out, doing crazy stuff. This was him yelling in a guy's face for a few seconds and then getting executed. I really didn't, it felt lackluster as hell to me.
To each their own. To each their own. But yeah, so that was one of my favorites. Maybe one of my favorite scenes of the series.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Jeez.
It was so great. To me. Yeah. Yeah, so who else? Is there anyone else, or should we go to Nucky?
Not notable.
Yeah, not notable. I feel like I'm forgetting someone, but
I know. I don't think so.
Yeah. So let's get to the big moment of the series.
Mm-hmm.
Tommy Darmody, and Nucky. It, like we said earlier on the podcast, it was telegraphed way too much. It was way too obvious.
Mm-hmm.
But the actual scene I liked a lot. The intercutting between that and him, his original sin of giving Gillian off to the Commodore was great. And I loved the dialogue. I loved the way Tommy revealed himself. He's like, just like Meemaw used to talk about you, and I could never tell if it was with love or with hate.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's it's unique, because you would think that he's doing that to avenge Jimmy, but it's also like, I mean, he's ruined 3 generations of this family.
Yeah. Plus, his mom's death was attributable to Nucky as well.
Sure.
Yeah. So
he's just destroyed this family. So
right. Yeah.
But I kind of love the reaction when Nucky throughout the season was kind of not depressed, but kind of just this kind of like, oh, I'm so sick of this kind of character kind of thing. And when he says that, when he's like, I'm Tommy Darmody, like he almost gets a smile.
Yeah.
I don't know if he knows that he's about to die or what, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting choice.
It's kind of an ambiguous reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the scene.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah. And again, it was just a little too overt of a callback to season 2, because I mean he shoots him in mid sentence, which is fine.
Yeah.
But then like when he puts the one bullet in his face at the exact the exact place where Jimmy was shot, I'm like,
yeah, that's a bit much.
No, just a little bit much.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, the juxtaposition between that, it was a beautiful sequence. It was beautiful.
Right.
I just kind of wish I didn't think of it, or I didn't assume that I didn't wonder if they were going to do that a year ago.
Yeah. So we've just about exhausted the last season.
We have, yeah.
Topics on the last season. So
and we're running long too, so...
What do you think the legacy of the show will be?
I was just going to ask you that. I went to Dayton, Ohio to visit some friends 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I mentioned like, oh, Boardwalk Empire is about to end and all that, or whenever it was. And John... Of Urian John, my friends Urian John was like, oh great, now I can watch it. Knowing that it was going to end. So I'm like, and with HBO announcing that they're going to release a standalone streaming service that's completely independent of cable and everything, like, which is deserving of a podcast in and of itself. But with that, I feel like I think people are going to discover this after after it's easily accessible to them.
Yeah.
And maybe that's for the best, because this show was not a show that really was conducive to episode, week to week viewing. And I feel like that's just, I hope that it'll have a second life after it's over now that it's over.
How do you feel the last season affected that sentiment, though?
That sentiment of people wanting to find
people finding it in the future, having having like a cult following in the future, if you will, almost like The Wire.
You know, I feel like there was so little fanfare for this show's final season that regardless of the final season's length, structure, time jumpiness, regardless of all those factors, I don't think there was enough. There was enough talked about the show to warrant those factors dissuading people from finding it. I think people are going to be like, oh, hey, there's a gangster drama, set in Prohibition era Atlantic City. Let's check it out. Why has no one watched it?
See, I feel like I don't think I think the final season will ruin that to an extent.
Right.
A little bit, because I feel like, because I couldn't help but think of the show like The Wire. No one watched it while it was on the air, but it was remarkably good, and then people just found it later, and word of mouth just spread like wildfire. I think people are going to be sitting there and watching the first 4 seasons and be like, man, this is freaking amazing. Why did nobody watch this? And then they're going to get to the 5th season and just be like, oh, well, it didn't end very well. And it just wasn't that good. And so they'll tell people, like, as opposed to like, with The Wire, people were like, it's the best thing ever. You have to watch it or you're not a person. But with this, I think they're going to be like, well, like 4 out of the 5 seasons were really good, but the 5th season, it didn't end that well. And I don't think it's going to spread like wildfire as a result of that.
Right. I don't think it'll be Wire level proportions, although I will say that a lot of people hate season 5 of The Wire.
Do they?
Yeah, because they feel like the serial killer storyline. That's all I'll say about it. They feel like that was just really, really awful. I loved it.
I liked it too.
But anyway.
Yeah. There's really no telling.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to tell what's going to take off and what's not.
Yeah. I don't know how it will play. The final season will play to people discovering the show.
Yeah.
And that it'll be interesting to see how people react to it.
Yeah. At the end of the last season, at the end of season 4, the previous season, I wanted it to have despite what I said earlier of I think 5 seasons is perfect, this show could have been phenomenal through 7 seasons, I think. I think anything more than that would have been too much, and we would have just gotten tired of it a little bit. But I think if it had done that full prophecy and skipped little bits of time here and there, and still, strung it out over 36 episodes or so, or 39, that could have been epic, and it would have been one of the great shows that you would mention amongst The Wire and Lost and The Sopranos and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't know, I just feel like this last season almost sort of took it out of the running. At best, it's towards the bottom of that list.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
I will agree with you, although I won't say it was the last season that would do it. I think I'll go back to the whole lack of focus on the story, on the character Nucky and all that. Like that whole explanation I did. I think that's
fair. Yeah.
I think people will observant viewers of the show, that people who absorb all the stuff that's in the show, I think that they'll notice the things that I noticed in rewatching it.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and it won't be, because they won't be experiencing it as a week-to-week, yearly thing like we did. Mm-hmm. They'll be experiencing it like they'll binge watch 2 seasons in like a couple days.
Yeah,
and they'll see the cracks.
Right. Yeah. I couldn't, as I was watching the show over the last 5 years, I couldn't help but compare a lot of it to The Sopranos, which was also run by Terrence Winter.
Right. I was going to ask you how you felt about because I feel like people have said that Boardwalk Empire kind of lives in the shadow of The Sopranos.
It does, and I think it's just because of the popularity of The Sopranos, which I think The Sopranos is substantially overrated. It is a good show. I think people who are big TV buffs should watch the show. It is a good show, but people discuss it amongst the best shows of all time.
Right.
I don't think it quite belongs in there. Maybe a top 20, but not a top 10.
Okay.
But it's interesting when what you said about that Boardwalk was supposed to be this character study of Nucky Thompson, but it kind of got away from that, and possibly to the detriment of the show overall. It's kind of an opinion, but whatever. But Sopranos was very much a character study of Tony Soprano,
right? And
they stuck to that through 6 seasons very well. And I don't think it was anywhere near as satisfying as what Boardwalk could have been if they had their time, I think. Because I agree with you that they didn't really want to end it after 5 seasons,
right?
Especially with 8 episodes. If they could have had their time to play everything out how they wanted to, I think Boardwalk would massively overshadow The Sopranos. And I think it's, even now, it's still, I think it's still a little bit better.
Nice.
I prefer Boardwalk to Sopranos, just personally.
Cool. I haven't been able to watch Sopranos.
There's a lot of similarities between the shows, though. There's a lot of similarities. Steve Buscemi was in both of them.
Right. It's kind of funny. Such a big part of Boardwalk Empire was Nucky's land deal that would become the New Jersey Turnpike, which is what Tony Soprano drives on every episode of Sopranos in the opening credits.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So just a funny little connection.
Yeah.
I think anything else we should talk about?
No. I really wish this could have been
more of a celebration.
Thank you. That's perfect. I wish it could have been more of a celebration, but it was more of an apology.
Yeah.
Almost. You kind of have to defend the show now. As a fan of it, you have to defend pieces of it, which is unfortunate because if they had been able to deliver their vision, you shouldn't have had to apologize for it.
Yeah.
Or, defend your opinion, I guess.
Yeah. If I could reference our own podcast, this is something that should have been a House of Cards bonus episode, but instead is almost to the level, not really on the same level, but How I Met Your Mother series finale episode.
Right.
It's something that there was so much potential for the show to be great, and it was great for a lot of it. A lot of it was really great. I mean, I will say it is one of the best looking and best produced and best shot shows I've seen.
Without a question.
Yeah, it's just a lack of direction and the storytelling that ultimately suffers, and a lack of planning, I guess.
Yeah. I failed to say that I think part of why television fans didn't latch onto the show as much, I think, is because it's such a cinematic show. Because you can almost look at each episode as a small movie, because it's just, I mean, that's a symptom of premium cable. You get you get a full 58, 59 minutes episode. It's almost a movie, you know, so it's almost feature length. And I think that's just less, it's less consumable in that format. I reference my opinion of the latest Sherlock TV show, which is an hour and a half episode.
Right.
I think it's just not episodic. And so I think I don't think that's a flaw of the show.
No.
I just think it's a different trait of it that people might not be quite as receptive to, who are used to a 22-minute The Big Bang Theory episode. You know what I mean?
Right.
With commercials and...
Yeah, that's definitely not the demographic that Boardwalk wants to attract.
Demographics. There you go. Yeah.
But yeah.
So I think it's ultimately a detriment to the show, but it's not a flaw of the show. It's a flaw of the audience, really.
Right.
Yeah.
And the show is such a slow burn too.
Yes.
The each season, save for the final season, and even elements of the final season is like this, but it's basically 10 episodes of setup, build up, character development, stuff like that. Yeah. And then it really ramps up in the last 3-4 episodes of the season.
You have to be dedicated.
Episodes. Yeah. And and the payoff is always really, really good.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I'm not going to go through every season, but just like the one that immediately jumps to mind is the whole war with Chip Rossetti in season 4 or season 3. That just pays off so well. Richard Harrow in the brothel thing, but
gosh, that was amazing.
So great. But what I think it is that television audiences, they can be receptive to slow burn shows.
Right.
Cult, the Wire became a cult classic. Sure, it didn't have the viewing of while it was airing and all that, but people are attracted to The Wire, and it's a slower burn than Boardwalk Empire. But I think the fundamental difference is that The Wire is a social commentary, and they have that to play off of. Boardwalk Empire is a slow burn gangster show. It's kind of doesn't really work that well. Yeah. In that respect. But
right.
But I will say, power watching the entire series in a month is really cool.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I'll probably shelf the series for a little while and come back to it in a year or two.
Yeah. I think maybe when the season 5 Blu-ray comes out, I'll check out the special features, because the special features are amazing on all the discs. Yeah. And I kind of want to check out the commentary tracks, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think that about does it.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Man, we talked about that. You talked about that. No, you have a much better comprehensive, relationship with the show than I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting, as a final thought, this is one of the only TV shows that I can say I saw it. I started it the second that it premiered, and I followed it through every single week. Well, a couple weeks I let it build up here and there, but I followed it every week for 5 years.
Yeah.
And it
just took 5 years to watch the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, which a lot of people don't watch shows that way anymore.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm someone who waits 2 seasons before I pick up a show, because I'm afraid it'll get canceled.
Right.
Yeah. So it's interesting to me that something like that can happen.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that about does it. We're gonna throw it to the to the pre-recorded outros. Real quick, I just want to say that we have lined up for the podcast coming up. We have what is the next one? Favorite movie dialogue, which is going to be fun to record, and then we're also going to do an episode dedicated to Interstellar, which just came out. That's going to be a fun one, man.
It is. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, and then on the blog we still have decade reviews coming out from my reviews of movies that I reviewed a decade ago, re-reviewed now.
Those are so much fun, dude.
Yeah, I'm so nervous.
I know it's at the expense of your ego.
Oh, absolutely.
But those are fun.
It's bad. It's fun. It's fun. And I'm getting the chance to check out some really cool movies that I like. I just watched, this is a total tangent, and I'll throw it to the outro after this, but, rewatching Stray Dog, which is going to post on Sunday or tomorrow. It'll be posted on the website by the time you hear this. Stray Dog, the Kurosawa movie from 49. Rewatching that, I'm like, I have all of these Akira Kurosawa DVDs from when I was a douchebag, pretentious teenager who just bought up all the Criterion Collection editions of movies of this Japanese filmmaker because I wanted to be a film snob and everything.
Yeah.
But watching it, I'm like, oh my God, he's so good. It's so good. And I'm like, I think next year I want to just take all of those DVDs and like review each one.
Wow.
But yeah.
That's cool.
So yeah. Anyway, so thank you for listening, guys. Let us know what you think of the episode and of the final season of Boardwalk Empire, the series as a whole, its legacy in the HBO pantheon of television.
Right.
And also, let us know what you thought about not Tommy Darmody.
Yeah.
That whole thing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so.
We'll miss you, Boardwalk.
Yep. To the lost.
To the lost.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks. As always, thank you for listening to the Obsessive Viewer podcast. Thank you to Loud Like for providing our awesome opening theme music. Their first EP is called Mistakes We Must Make and features our theme song and a clips of events. Please head over to iTunes and download their album. While you're there, make sure to give us a rate and a review. It helps us climb the podcast charts, and we really appreciate feedback. Speaking of feedback, please like our Facebook page at facebook.com/theobsessiveviewer and follow each of us on Twitter. You can find me, Tiny, at ObsessiveTiny, Matt is at ObsessiveViewer, and Mike is at I am Mike White. You can also check out the blog at obsessiveviewer.com, where we, but mostly Matt, review movies, TV shows, and comment on the industry as a whole. While you're web surfing, please head over to our sister site, obsessivebooknerd.com, where we review books and comment on the ever-evolving world of reading. If you're philosophically curious, please go explore my side project, the Secular Perspective Podcast, which is a show that explores the concept of faith, religion, and existence from a secular perspective. If you have any thoughts on the podcast or suggestions for future episodes, you can also email us individually at Matt, Tiny, or Mike at obsessiveviewer.com, or email the podcast directly at podcast@obsessiveviewer.com. Thanks for joining us today, and please come back.